it fair that China and the US drag South Korea into a very difficult situation that it has to choose between the two?
Yeah, this is a really controversial situation we are facing now. Actually, Sino-ROK relations has been on a very smooth and stable condition, and in recent years we have witnessed the fast development, not only in economy but also in politics. As you know, so this is a good tendency. Why suddenly, the THAAD, occurred in the relations between the two sides? I think we should, have in-depth thought on these issues. This is actually a game or gambling by some countries in this region.
All right, is some country you're referring to the United States? I don't know. So let me go to Professor Hwang. What do you think? Is it fair to drag Seoul, South Korea into this conflict, or rather taking sides?
Well, no, I think there is a fundamental misunderstanding. I actually disagree with the entire premise that you began with. First of all, South Korea is not being dragged between China and the United States. That was a fear that is often cited in South Korea. It's simply a mistake. South Korea has been a very strong ally of the United States since 1953, and the reason that there is this ongoing security alliance is because of the threat of North Korea. So let's be clear, it is North Korea that has created the tension and stability in the region, and the United States and South Korea are responding to this tension by the implementation of THAAD. THAAD is a defensive system to thwart North Korea's provocations.
Well, that is being well understood, but on the other hand, Mr. Teng, it seems that as a result of the possibility of implementing THAAD system inside South Korea, there have been protesters coming from China and Russia. Rather, it seems that the players in the issue has go beyond South Korea, DPRK, and the United States to China, Russia, and some of the other countries as well. So once again, what does it mean to the region?
Different countries have different understandings on this deployment. As for China, I think the Chinese government has shown its great concern to the deployment. It's not only for the sake of the Chinese security interests, but also for the regional peace and stability.
What do you mean?
For example, I'm sure the deployment of THAAD system in ROK will give some impact on the development of military capability in North Korea. So this is actually a competition in this region, especially in military capability. And also, we can see the response from Russia and from other countries in this region. So this reaction actually just gave a very negative influence on the current stable and current good relations among countries like Sino-ROK relations.
Very interesting point there. Professor Hwang, what do you think? I mean, it seems that what Mr. Teng tried to indicate is a vicious cycle that is not just between the North and the South anymore, as it was earlier depicted by the Korean Peninsula nuclear crisis. But now this is much more beyond that, and a vicious cycle among many players now in Northeast Asia.
Well, again, I have to respectfully disagree. I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding about offensive versus defensive weapons. Look, China and Russia are choosing to become involved in this issue, and they are choosing to make this a problem for China and Russia. Frankly speaking, THAAD is a defensive system, and it absolutely does not cause North Korea to increase its offensive weapons. It is simply a reaction to North Korea's ongoing missile tests. If China and Russia are unhappy about the deployment of THAAD, which is clearly because South Korea feels vulnerable to North Korea's increasing missile development, then China and Russia should no longer support North Korea. as it has continued to consistently do throughout the decades.
I think there are two accusations coming from Professor Hwang. One is that others are trying to make an excuse for their own military buildup as a result of the THAAD system or possibility of THAAD system in South Korea. And secondly, China and Russia has been assisting DPRK rather than working together with the other countries against the military buildup and the nuclear buildup on the Korean Peninsula. For those two accusations, Mr. Teng, would you like to respond to that? Of course, you're not representing Russia, I guess, in this way, but rather coming from a Chinese perspective.
Yeah, you're right. I think it seems to us that the missile capability in DPRK does, pose a very serious challenge for the regional security and stability. But let's discuss this is from two approaches. The first is the geopolitical approach. Actually, the United States initiated a global military defense system, especially a missile defense system, simultaneously, in Asia Pacific region and also in Europe. So this is actually a global.
When was that?
Yeah, it's a global project initiated by the United States, and its target is not only Iran and the DPRK, targeted at the two, Eurasia continental country, Russia and China. So this is actually a strategic challenge for the deterrence and operation capability, especially for the two nuclear weapon states. So this is the geopolitical consideration. Another is military consideration. If we look at the capability of THAAD system, it can do the surveillance, just in inland in China. So this is actually really a challenge for the national security. That's why China gave such a strong position, give strong protest against the deployment in Korean Peninsula. So I think from this perspective, we can have a good understanding, not only look at the missile capability in DPRK.
I'll let Professor Hwang to respond to you a little bit later, but you have to respond also to her second point, which is China and Russia have not been working with the other partners in the Asia Pacific region and beyond on working against the DPRK nuclear buildup. Rather, China was helping the DPRK with its nuclear buildup.
Yeah, you're right. I don't think China and Russia can give any significant support in the military development or build-up in DPRK. This is actually a resolution by the UN Security Council, and China, in recent years have contributed greatly to the resolution and also to the imposition of these resolutions. And of course, Russia did the same. So any execution saying that China gave support to the development of military capability in DPRK actually is quite irrational.
All right, let me go to, okay, sorry, I cut you short. Sorry, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I think that this is actually only execution from the United States and ROK.
All right. Professor Hwang, you want to respond to what Mr. Teng just said, but rather maybe with a step forward, if I could ask, what role exactly is the United States playing? First of all, having its missile defense system and missile build-up system, as Professor Teng earlier said, around the world, including possible deployment in the Asia-Pacific region, and many believe that is part of it, the THAAD system inside South Korea. Is the United States escalating the buildup of military weapons and defense systems around the world? Secondly, what has the U.S. been doing in terms of trying to work out with partners of the six-party talks a possible solution on the Korean Peninsula? As far as I understand, Professor Hwang, there has been so-called a strategic patience policy coming from Washington, namely meaning doing nothing. Professor Hwang.
Well, let me simply say, because the six-party nuclear issue is a completely separate issue, I will quickly say that the Obama administration's policy
how come is it a completely different issue? Because the missile defense system THAAD was supposed to go against the military buildup inside DPRK as claimed by the United States,
because
and yet
the six-party talks.
Go ahead.
Because the six-party talks never had missiles on the agenda. Okay, so we need to be very clear and very proper. First of all, to characterize my comments as accusations is incorrect. They are simply observations. Now, the six-party talks is about denuclearizing North Korea. The Obama administration's policy is officially not strategic patience. This is something that analysts have called it. Regardless, that is not the point. The point is that North Korea itself has declared that it is not interested in participating anymore. Having said that, it is also a mischaracterization to say that the U.S. is expanding its military and missile deployment around the world. Now, the issue, in fact, the United States, currently we're having a domestic debate because the U.S. Budget plans are actually to decrease funding for our missiles. The issue is not missiles. The issue is missile defense systems. Are missile defense systems being deployed and expanded around the world? Yes. Why? Because they are in reaction to the provocations and increase in tensions caused by other countries. So we have to be very clear and very exact about this.
Okay, Professor Hwang, you have made your point. Mr. Teng, you want to respond to that, especially the lack of trust between China and the United States. How much is that playing its role in terms of this whole debate about the so-called THAAD missile defense system, including Russia's strategic mistrust with the United States as well?
Yeah, if we look at the situation in Korean Peninsula, we can have a good conclusion that, especially in recent years, since the ending of the six-party talks, actually the tension there is from the two sides, from the United States and from DPRK. So if we have a good understanding on the mistrust or competition, I'd like to use competition, is not only mistrust. Actually, the competition between the United States and China in security has been intensified in recent years, especially in the South China Sea, in cyberspace, in Korean Peninsula. It's a whole set of the competition between the two countries. And mistrust is actually a strategic issue we are facing now. But we all agreed that we can have a new model of relationships among major powers.
Well, we don't
and
know yet
no
the
confrontation,
content of
no dispute, and mutual trust, and also win-win cooperation.
Well, those sound beautiful words, but we don't know yet how to implement those beautiful words. As Mr. Teng, you know this much better than I do. Having said that, though, we have earlier invited a South Korean panelist to join our discussion. It's only fair that the South Koreans are voicing their different opinions, but at the very last moment, that panelist has canceled his appearance at the discussion due to some emergencies back at home. So now we need to look at what the South Koreans need to think about and also have been facing over the years. In fact, according to some statistics, agreeing on the deployment of THAAD was not a smooth decision for the South Koreans. Let's take a look at some of the timelines. Is the South Koreans government under pressure while making its decision, or is it convinced that the THAAD is necessary for protection of DPRK? Take a look at this.
In 2013, the South Korean military asked the Pentagon to provide information on the THAAD system as part of efforts to strengthen its defenses against DPRK missiles. However, South Korea decided to develop its own indigenous long-range surface-to-air missile instead of buying THAAD. Then, in 2015, the Wall Street Journal revealed the U.S. was studying sites in which to base THAAD in South Korea. But the South Korean government denied this and reaffirmed its stance of not joining the U.S. missile defense system. However, over a year later, the deployment of THAAD in the nation was officially announced.
Well, that is mainly a recent timeline of some of the decisions and debates going on in South Korea, because we don't have South Korean panelists. So I have to ask questions from different perspectives. So let me go to you, Professor Hwang, on this. We have been seeing reports, not only in Chinese media, South Korean media, but also media around the world, suggesting there are different kinds of opinions inside South Korea. And this is almost the last stage of the Park administration. So with the division both within the party and beyond in the society, what does that mean for the Park administration? And what does that mean for the implementation, as she claims, of the THAAD system?
Okay, well, I certainly don't speak for the South Korean government, but I do study the ROK very carefully. So let me see if I can provide some objective analysis. First of all, South Korea is a vibrant democracy. This is extremely important. What this means is that in this democratic society, that the public has the ability to voice their varied opinions and opposition.
All right.
And because South Korea has a free media, often the media chooses to focus just on these protesters. Now, the protesters that are currently quite angry about employment of THAAD is actually a local issue. National polls show consistently that the majority of South Koreans, and when I say the majority of South Koreans, close to 75% of the South Korean public supports THAAD. Now, it is correct that until through 2015, the South Korean government was resistant to the U.S. idea of employing a U.S. ROK THAAD system, which is an integrated bilateral system.
All right, Mr. Hwang.
And the reasons are...
Professor Hwang, you have 30 seconds to go because we need to leave 30 seconds for the Chinese guests as well.
Yes. So the reason that the government has changed its position and is now adopting THAAD and why the South Korean public supports this is because of North Korean missile provocations. They have launched more than a dozen missiles in 2016 and a nuclear test. This is the reason the public supports THAAD.
Okay, well, there are many reasons why the public support
With
or
an overwhelming
disapprove
majority.
as time goes by. But let me ask you, Professor Teng, here in Beijing, what do you make of the division going on in South Korea? What that might mean for the South Korean government from your perspective, of course, and what would that mean for China-South Korea relations as there are already talk about of trade sanctions or some kinds of quote-unquote punishment for South Korea coming from China, even though the state policy has not yet reached that to a certain degree?
In my opinion, I think the DPRK current government actually should have two misperceptions. The first, that the THAAD system will cover all the territory of ROK, but the fact is only cover 2/3 of the territory of DPRK, and the capital region, I mean Seoul.
All right.
It has at least 20 million citizens not included in the protection of the this system. So this is one important reason for the our case people angry. And the second misperception is that China will give any real response to this acceptance of deployment of such a system. So I think the ROK government used to be very cautious in terms of the deployment, but Park Geun-hye's administration gave such a green light to the deployment. I think the situation or the relations between China and ROK actually suffered a lot in recent days. We have witnessed the response from the Chinese side.